good afternoon, ma. Yes, ma. Eh? Na prison. See them all. Na prisoners. Ma greet them well. Hello. Good afternoon.
So ask me why Ella is
Good
greeting and shining
afternoon.
her teeth like she just won the lottery. Don't worry. She'll let you know in a minute. But before she does, let me tell you something. You know how parents always say, good love is found in church gatherings? Go and find a fine brother or sister who can pray and fast for 40 days and 40 nights. Or they tell you, go to the library. The next Elon Musk or Chimamanda Adichie is there, buried in books, just waiting for you to distract them. But this one? This one is different. As Ella walks home, she starts smiling to herself, chuckling under her breath, like she just remembered something sweet or dangerous.
Please leave me to shine my teeth, I beg. Maybe I will see bright future prisoner. Well, I beg go. Make I not go jam the one. We go sell my kidney.
She laughs at her own joke, shaking her head playfully. As she walks further, a commotion catches her attention. A warder is angrily throwing his wife's belongings out of their flat, shouting. The neighbors peep through their windows, murmuring.
These ones, I bet don't mind them. Today no be their story, Don't worry, today na love story. Yay!
Agodi Prison, a place where justice is served. Or at least, that's what they say. Some call it a correctional facility, others, a waiting room, where destinies hang in the balance. Agodi is a minimum security prison, but don't be fooled. It's also a transit hub, a halfway point between freedom and fate. For some, it's just a temporary stop, a place to wait until the courts decide their future, a short stay before they walk free. But for others, it's the last breath of open air before they are sent to maximum security, where time moves slowly and hope is a rare commodity. A place of decisions, a place of waiting, a place of judgment. And today, a new story begins.
On a quiet afternoon at Agodi Prison, a secured van rolled up to the heavy gates, its engine rumbling to a halt. The air was thick with dust, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the concrete yard. Inside the van sat a new batch of inmates, some convicted, beginning their sentences, others still awaiting trial, their fates hanging in the balance of ongoing court proceedings. Mr. Ben, the officer on duty, stood at the entrance, arms crossed, watching with a seasoned gaze. A man of discipline and routine, he approached his task with the same diligence he had shown for years. His crisp khaki uniform bore the weight of experience, his demeanor stern but fair. This was his domain, and he ensured it was run by the book. As the inmates stepped out one by one, the processing began. At this point, names no longer mattered. Each man was assigned a number, a cold combination of their date of conviction and the rank of their offense. A system designed to strip away identity, reducing each prisoner to a series of digits and codes. Among the new arrivals was a young man, tall, quiet, with eyes that carried the weight of the world. His number was 2309. Unlike the others, he did not shuffle forward in fear or defiance. He stood apart, not in rebellion, but with a quiet dignity that caught the attention of even the most seasoned officers. Mr. Ben's gaze lingered on him for a moment before returning to the list in his hands. Just another prisoner, just another number. Little did anyone know, this was the day that would change everything. Not just for 2039, but for Gloria, Mr. Ben's daughter, who was about to walk into a story she never saw coming.
Gloria's father, Mr. Ben, was a semi-built man, at least according to him. Mr. Ben's journey to becoming a prison warder was anything but conventional. He was a struggling spare parts seller at Isopart, when, one fateful day, a prisoner made a daring escape attempt near his shop. With surprising agility, Mr. Ben tackled the man,
earning himself a reward, employment as a prison
Now
warder.
lie, the man is very short. Ah, if not for the luck that he had that day, do you think he will get the job? Do you think he will get the job? He plan himself. Wait though, am I jealous?
Whether by fate or calculated move, the job changed Mr. Ben's life. He quickly climbed the ranks, married a warder's sister, and built a family, his daughter Gloria, and 2 younger sons. Life started looking up for him.
Gloria, Mr. Ben's daughter, was nothing short of extraordinary. A charming and strong-willed young woman, she stood out among her peers in the barracks, not just for her beauty, but for her intellect and unwavering determination. Unlike many of the other girls who grew up within the barracks, Gloria carried herself with a quiet grace and poise, a reflection of her father's unyielding discipline and the high standards he set for his children. Mr. Ben was adamant about one thing: his children would not settle for less. At the time, Gloria was in her final year of law school, a step away from becoming the first lawyer in their family. But as fate would have it, a nationwide lecturers' strike had put a frustrating pause on her education, forcing her to stay home for an indefinite period. Rather than idling away, Gloria found purpose. She joined the Prison Evangelism Forum, a volunteer group dedicated to bringing hope and spiritual support to inmates. They visited the prison regularly, sharing the Word of God, offering encouragement, and even helping some prisoners secure legal aid for their cases. For Gloria, this wasn't just about faith, it was about justice. She believed that not every man behind bars was guilty and that everyone deserved a chance to be heard. What she did not know, however, was that this decision, to walk through the prison gates as a beacon of hope, would change her life forever. Because among the inmates she would soon meet, one would rewrite the course of her story in ways she never imagined. It was Legal Aid Day at Agodi Prison, a day when new inmates willing to speak could come forward. The outreach team, including Gloria and other volunteers, sat behind a long wooden table, flipping through documents, taking notes, and listening carefully. One by one, prisoners stepped forward, sharing their stories, some hopeful, some desperate. Then, an inmate stepped forward, inmate 2309. For a moment, he stood in line, waiting for his turn. But just before reaching the front, he hesitated. His fingers curled into fists, his head dipped slightly, and then he stepped out of the line. He turned and walked back toward his cell. Gloria noticed immediately. She stood up.
Hey, you, wait!
Gloria called him, but he kept walking, shoulders tense, footsteps heavy. Gloria quickened her pace, reaching him just as he stepped into the corridor leading back to the cells. Gloria, slightly breathless.
Why did you leave? You were next in line.
It doesn't matter.
It does matter. You were willing to speak a moment ago.
My case is a murder case. No one will help me. No one will believe me. Gloria's heart sank. She wanted to say something, to reassure him, but before she could, he walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the cell block. 2309 didn't rush, nor did he hesitate. His steps were steady, deliberate, as if he had long made peace with his fate.
That night, Gloria could do anything but sleep. She tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the memory of his face, the weight in his voice, the finality in his words.
Why? Why would someone reject an opportunity that others would give anything for?
As Gloria lay awake, lost in thought, the door creaked open slightly. Her mother stepped inside, her tall frame silhouetted in the dim light. Gloria's mother said softly,
Gloria, it's late. Why are you still awake?
Gloria confided in her mother, sharing what little she knew and pleading with her not to tell her father. I'll tell him myself when I need his help, she assured her. Her mother sighed, her voice firm. Gloria, leave your father out of this. If that man isn't willing to speak, there's little the outreach can do. And you know your father doesn't support you joining the outreach. He only tolerates it because it keeps you busy while the strike lasts. If he finds out you're this invested in one inmate's case..." She trailed off, shaking her head. The next morning, Gloria made a decision. If she wanted answers, she had to take a risk. Carrying a food flask, she made her way to her father's office at Agodi Prison. Inside his small, neatly arranged office, Mr. Ben was caught off guard when he saw his daughter walk in with a smile. He arched a brow but couldn't hide his slight amusement. Mr. Ben, surprised yet pleased, "Ah, my daughter, you came all the way here just to bring me food? What do you want?" Gloria chuckled lightly, setting the flask down on his desk. Gloria. Softly, hesitating. "Daddy, I met someone here yesterday. Can I have a word with him?" Her father's brows furrowed immediately. Mr. Ben, suspiciously, putting down his pen. "Who?" Gloria fumbled for a moment, pretending to struggle with remembering. Gloria, carefully choosing her words. "I can't recall his name, but he's new. His number, it ends with 09. Mr. Ben froze for a second. His expression darkened as he slowly exhaled, rubbing his chin. Then, almost in a whisper, he muttered, "Mr. Ben," low, wary tone. "A murderer." His eyes snapped back to Gloria. "Mr. Ben," firmly, voice rising slightly. "Gloria, what exactly are you doing here?" Gloria shifted nervously, knowing she was stepping into dangerous territory. Gloria, pleading but careful. "Daddy, I just want to check his file. That's all. He refused to talk to me, but I feel like there's more to his case." Before she could finish, Mr. Ben slammed his hand on the table.
"Gloria, no. Have you learned nothing from my stories? Do you know how many officers have ruined their careers because they got too involved? I almost lost my job twice trying to help an inmate. You think these prisoners don't know how to manipulate people? They study you. They make you feel sorry for them. Next thing you know, your name is in their mess."
"Go home. Now," Mr. Ben commanded, his voice sharp and final. Defeated, Gloria silently picked up the food flask, her fingers tightening around it as she turned toward the door. Her father's anger didn't surprise her, but what he failed to see was that his outburst had only fueled her determination. She needed answers, and if he wouldn't help her, she would find another way.
Gloria was a good girl, no doubt. But growing up in the barracks taught you something valuable. When one door won't open, you find another way in. Determined to get the information she needed, she reached out to Officer Cola, one of the junior warders. Young, easygoing, and known to handle a lot of administrative work, he was exactly the kind of person who could access prison records. If she played her cards right, he might just be her way in.
"I have a loose 20,000 for the job."
Officer Cola, ever the opportunist, smirked, tilting his head. Cola. "Oh, or you could pay the other way, though." Gloria's expression turned cold in an instant. She fixed him with a sharp. Without another word, she shoved the 20,000 into his hand. "Gloria," said firmly, "deliver the letter and hand me what you can get." Nothing else. She turned away, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with determination. Cola watched her leave, rolling the cash between his fingers. He could push his luck. But something in Gloria's stance told him she wasn't one to be messed with.
Officer Cola had done his part. He over-delivered, because for a small price, he has been secretly dispatching letter and has even arranged a private meeting between herself, a legal representative Gloria arranged, and inmate 2309, Daniel. Inside a dimly lit interrogation room, Gloria and the lawyer sat on one side of a steel table, hands folded in front of her, steady and composed. The door creaked open, and Daniel walked in, escorted by a guard. He hesitated for a moment before sitting across from her. His movements were guarded, but his eyes, those deep, tired eyes, held years of pain and betrayal. Gloria wasted no time. Gloria, calmly but firmly.
I read your letters. We got some information from your case file, although some tampered with, Daniel. I know what they're saying about you, but I need to hear it from you. I need to know the truth.
Daniel leaned back, exhaling deeply. He stared at the table for a long moment, then rubbed his forehead as if debating whether he should say anything at all. Finally, he spoke.
You won't believe me either, no one does.
Try me, Daniel.
For the first time since his arrest, Daniel found himself speaking freely. He told her about his uncle, the man who raised him after his parents died. His uncle had been his mentor, sponsor, and only known family, putting him through school and making sure he became a trained mechanical engineer. But there was a darker side to the story. His uncle wasn't just a guardian. He was a ruthless businessman and a rising government aspirant, a man who believed that power was taken, not given. One night, his uncle had an argument with his business partner, a man who threatened to expose some fraudulent dealings just before a big election. That same night, the man was shot dead. Daniel had no idea what had happened until the police stormed his apartment. A gun was found, hidden in his belongings. His uncle had framed him. Daniel, bitterly. I remember the way he looked at me when I was being dragged away. No remorse, no guilt. He promised me he'd get me out, but it's been over a year. And now I see it for what it is. Gloria's fingers tightened around her notes.
Your uncle lied to you, didn't he?
Of course he did. He made sure I took the fall so his hands would stay clean. And the worst part, I trusted him. I called him my father.
A heavy silence settled between them. Then, as the meeting ended and the guards prepared to escort him back, Daniel did something unexpected. He reached out, gently pulling Gloria's hand. For the first time since they met, he looked at her, not with suspicion, not with guarded fear, but with something softer.
Thank you.
Their eyes locked, and in that moment something shifted.
Nothing shifted in that interrogation room, at least not in the air, but something shifted in Gloria's heart. As Daniel's voice trailed off, Gloria sat still for a moment, her gaze locked on the man across from her. He didn't flinch, he didn't plead, he just told the truth. Gloria, whispering to herself, "No, my father was wrong." That night, Gloria couldn't sleep. She sat under her reading lamp, surrounded by court transcripts, surveillance logs, and a copy of Daniel's old case file. Parts of it smudged, redacted, and clearly tampered with. She began cross-referencing dates, phone calls, and signatures. She spoke to the outreach team she once volunteered with. She contacted a civil rights group and demanded they take up Daniel's case. Over the next few weeks, a new lawyer took charge, supported by Gloria's documents and sworn statements. A private investigator began tracing the financial records and call logs that led back to Daniel's uncle. The truth didn't ask for permission. It erupted, like floodwaters shattering a dam. It tore through every lie. Falsified witness reports, hidden forensic evidence, phone records tracing back to his own uncle. The courtroom held its breath as the lawyer's voice cut through the tension. And then those words Daniel had stopped dreaming of hearing. This court finds Daniel Okechukwu not guilty on all charges. Free. After 2 years of fluorescent lights and answering to 2309, freedom felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. His eyes couldn't even process the sky. And Gloria? She didn't cheer, didn't cry, just watched as the man she fought for learned how to breathe again. While one man walked into freedom, another walked into a cell. Daniel's uncle was arrested 2 days later. Embezzlement, witness tampering, conspiracy to frame. The headlines screamed of justice finally served. The same prison that once held Daniel now held the man who betrayed him. Meanwhile, Mr. Ben's suspension letter arrived like a thunderclap. Unauthorized access to classified prisoner files. Immediate suspension pending investigation. Gloria stood frozen in their living room as her father, always so proud, so disciplined, crumpled the letter in his fist. His voice shook with betrayal. Mr. Ben, you used my access after all my warnings? Gloria, you've ruined everything I've worked for. Gloria's mother wept silently in the corner. The twins, sensing the storm, had fled to their room. Gloria, whispering, I had to, Daddy. Daniel was innocent. Mr. Ben, roaring, out! If you choose prisoners over your own family, then go! That night, Gloria found herself on the streets with nothing but her phone and a backpack. With trembling hands, she called the only person who'd understand. Daniel answered on the first ring. Within an hour, he was there, wrapping her in his arms as she sobbed into his shirt. You shouldn't have risked so much for me, Gloria, lifting her head. It was worth it. For the first time in years, Daniel cried too. Weeks later, while sorting through his late father's documents, Daniel made a shocking discovery. His uncle's stolen wealth? It was never his. Deeds, bank records, a will, all proving the businesses, the houses, even the cars were rightfully his father's. His uncle had not only framed him for murder, but had stolen his inheritance. Daniel hired a fierce lawyer. Within months, courts overturned the fraud. The wealth was restored. One sunny afternoon, Daniel arrived at Mr. Ben's house in a sleek car, Gloria beside him. Her father answered the door, his face hardened, until Daniel knelt. Sir, I've come to ask for your forgiveness and your blessing. Daniel said he placed two things on the step, an engagement ring for Gloria, a deed for one of his father's steel companies, now under Mr. Ben's management. Mr. Ben, eyes wet. You trust me with this? After everything? Daniel, smiling. Family looks out for family. Gloria squeezed his hand as her father pulled them both into a crushing embrace. And so the man who was once prisoner 2309 didn't just win his freedom, he won a family. As for Gloria, she finally proved that sometimes the best love stories begin where others see endings.
Yes, that's me, dancing. I don't have a problem. If not that why I just released my result and said I have to pass. And only 6 fail. Me, I want to be a nurse. Nurse no go work, oh, na go last. Eh? One fair more, eh? Then my mom. What would be? Eh, wait, oh. Don't be police with this.
Who is Jessica here? Who is Jessica here? Jessica?
They will arrest Jessie baby today.
Emanuela.
Who is Jessica here? Who is Jessica here? Jessica?
Emanuela.
They call me. How would I continue this gist now? And make a hand over first. Make a hand over.
Yes, so my name is Ella Baby. Now me go give you this barrack gist the way you want it. Just listen. Let me start from the beginning. The gist is sweet to me. Yes, all of them is from left.
Let me break this barracks life down a bit. The barracks were a world of their own, a close-knit community where families of warders, policemen, and military personnel lived side by side. The buildings were modest, rows of bungalows stretching out in uniformity, with children running barefoot in the sandy open spaces between them. Women gathered under the shade of trees, sharing gossip and laughter, while men in uniforms moved about with purpose. Even despite the sense of order, the barracks had an undercurrent of chaos, shouting matches between neighbors, loud music blaring from transistor radios, and the occasional visit from superiors enforcing discipline. It was a place where people made do with little, finding joy in the small things. A game of football, a shared pot of stew, or the evening breeze after a long, hot day.
Let me gist you on how it all began.
In the early 1980s, before the era of social media and instant messaging, people found friendships across the world through pen pals, an old-school way of connecting with strangers by exchanging handwritten letters. Veronica, a young Polish woman, signed up for a pen pal program in hopes of making international friends. Little did she know, this would change her life forever. Among the many letters she received, one stood out. It was from a man named Prince from Nigeria. His words were poetic, filled with grand tales of his heritage, and he spoke of Africa with such mystique that Veronica couldn't help but be enchanted. She assumed, quite naturally, that he was a real prince. After all, his name was Prince, and his descriptions of his homeland painted a picture of royalty and grandeur. For months, they exchanged letters, growing fonder of each other with every page. Veronica, dreaming of an adventurous love story, made the daring decision to leave Poland and travel to Nigeria to be with her prince. When Veronica arrived in Nigeria, she expected a royal reception, perhaps drums, dancers, and a palace. Instead, she was greeted by a well-built man in a prison warder's uniform. Her prince was no royal. He was Mr. Prince, a 31-year-old prison warder who barely made enough money to sustain himself.
Where is your palace?
Veronica asked in disbelief. Prince chuckled nervously. You misunderstood, my love. I am Prince in name, not in title.
Veronica nearly fainted. She had left her country, family, and life behind for a man she believed to be royalty, only to find out he was a humble civil servant.
You lied to me.
She screamed. I never said I was a king's son. You did not even ask. I just let you believe what you wanted and hoping you would like what you see.
Veronica was furious, but as she looked at the charming, broad-shouldered man standing before her, something strange happened. She fell in love all over again. Or maybe it was the intense Nigerian heat messing with her mind. Either way, it was too late to turn back. That very night, in the small one-bedroom flat Prince called home, she conceived their first and only child, Jessica. Jessica was born a few months later, a breathtakingly beautiful child with striking features, deep brown eyes, golden skin, and soft, curly hair. She was the perfect blend of Polish and Nigerian heritage, a head-turner wherever she went. Growing up in Agodi barracks, Jessica was both admired and envied. She was different, and that difference made her special. But it also made her a target. Kids would tease her, calling her Oyinbo, white person one day, and half-caste the next. But Jessica held her head high, knowing she was a rare beauty. On the other hand, Jessica's mom, Veronica, began to realize the harsh truth. She had given up everything for a man she thought had all the money in Africa, a man she believed would make her a queen. But now she saw things differently. There were days when Veronica regretted her choices. She would call Prince a wretched man and dream of going back to her old life. But going back wasn't easy. Her neighbors in the barracks were no help. One day, they would admire her love story, and the next, they would gossip about it like cats and dogs. But Veronica wasn't one to wallow in regret for long. She decided to take control of her life, inspired by how she had found love through letters, even if it was based on a misunderstanding. She came up with a plan. Veronica started a business. Her promise: to connect Nigerian men with foreign women for marriage. The deal was simple. Desperate Nigerian men, eager to marry foreign wives and secure visas, would pay her to link them with Oyinbo women. Veronica would spin elaborate stories about Polish, Russian, and American women who were desperate to marry African men. She told her clients these women needed money for visas, flight tickets, and upkeep. The men, blinded by the dream of an exotic European wife, handed over their hard-earned money. Veronica would take it, promise them love. It was a brilliant scam. The men kept coming, each one believing in the dream Veronica sold them. And Veronica? She lived comfortably, funded by their desperation. As Jessica grew older, she became part of her mother's business, albeit unknowingly. She often took pictures of supposed husbands-to-be as part of the matchmaking process. The men believed these photos would be sent to their future wives overseas, while Veronica pocketed their cash.
Hooray! Okay, yes, business is booming. Veronica's business began thriving beyond her expectations. She had excess money to spend, clubbing and making merry. But we all know that with wealth came pride, and soon she no longer saw a need for Prince. Oh, poor Prince. Prince's world was crumbling around him. Despite his desperate pleas, Veronica's heart remained resolute. She had already set the divorce proceedings in motion, and Prince's once stable life was now on shaky ground. At work, Prince struggled to concentrate, his mind consumed by the impending loss of his wife and the life they had built together. His performance suffered, and he teetered on the brink of losing his job as a prison officer. But Veronica remained unmoved, her determination to leave him unshakable. She said,
"When I'm done, I'll move out of this house.
she said, her voice devoid of emotion.
But until then, I'll operate my business from here."
Prince's eyes pleaded with her to reconsider, but Veronica's gaze remained cold, her resolve unbreakable. The man who had once been her everything now seemed insignificant, a relic of a love that had lost its way.
On the other hand,
Jessica, now growing into a young woman, inherited her mother's arrogance. With her beauty and newfound influence, she took a twisted pleasure in luring married men into affairs. It was no longer just about the money. It was about power.
one day an interlude took place when a woman named Ella stormed into the marketplace yelling at Jessica.
"Because of your rubbish money and beauty, you took my boyfriend's Imagine. I know one day you and your mother will be exposed."
Jessica smirked, unfazed. Her mother had taught her well. Jessica replied,
"My name Jessie, baby. Please refer to me well."
Meanwhile, some of Veronica's clients had waited for months. Some have gone to the airport twice, expecting to welcome their foreign brides. But no one ever arrived. Veronica would always have an excuse.
The flights were canceled. They need more money for a new ticket and to book sleepovers in Dubai and Italy. Just a little more time and money, and I promise they'll be here. Your sweethearts will all be here, okay? I understand how you're feeling. They are also eager and can't wait.
Desperate and blinded by hope, the men would pay again and again. Veronica's deception ran deep. She crafted hundreds of fake letters, masquerading as messages from the women she claimed to have matched with her clients. With meticulous attention to detail, she varied her handwriting styles using different pens, concocting romantic tales and promises of eternal devotion. Her charade continued at the post office, where she would collect the letters, feigning excitement and anticipation. But unbeknownst to her, Ella's mother, a keen-eyed postal worker, had grown suspicious of Veronica's activities. She noticed a peculiar pattern. Veronica would open her postbox, drop in letters, wait a while, and then retrieve the same letters she had just deposited. One day, Ella's mother decided to investigate further. She watched as Veronica repeated her usual routine, and her suspicions were confirmed. The letters, supposedly from Veronica's European connections, were actually written by Veronica herself. The ruse was exposed, and Ella's mother now held the truth.
Oh.
Ella's mother gasped in disbelief. Her mind flashed back to the past, to a time when Prince was desperately searching for a wife. Ella's mother had introduced him to her own sister, Bimbo, a stunning woman with striking curves, confidence, and charm. But Prince had used Bimbo and sent her away without a second thought. Now, as she pieced together Veronica's elaborate scam, she smirked bitterly. "Good for him," she muttered under her breath. But then her thoughts shifted. So this woman has been scamming all these men? Her heart pounded with urgency as she rushed home to tell their neighbor, Brambo. Brambo, in turn, relayed the shocking news to Lade, and soon word traveled like wildfire. Eventually, the revelation reached Andrew, one of Veronica's most loyal and long-suffering clients. Andrew had been waiting for his foreign wife for months. He had gone to the airport twice, each time leaving with nothing but dashed hopes and more excuses from Veronica. She had promised him that if his bride did not arrive, she would let him marry her daughter, Jessica. Veronica had said it jokingly, laughing it off, but Andrew had taken note of her words. "Your daughter is beautiful, though," he had said with a smile at the time. But now, as the reality of her deception hit him, His smile was gone. Trembling with rage, Andrew felt his entire world collapse. "Oh! My money, no!" he cried out, his hands shaking. He refused to be made a fool of any longer. Fueled by anger and desperation, he stormed off to the police station, not to arrest Jessica, but to hold Veronica to her word. If she had promised him her daughter, then she would have to deliver. Before others could come for Jessica as their last resort, Andrew would claim what was his.
Broke loose in the barracks. Neighbors gathered, murmuring and exchanging knowing glances. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others whispered, "Serves her right." Meanwhile, Veronica had already laid out her plans to disappear the next day. Her bags were packed, her getaway route mapped out. But before she could slip away, news of Andrew's move reached her ears. The air grew thick with tension as she realized that time was no longer on her side. When the police arrived at Veronica's home with Andrew, the crowd had already swelled. They pushed through the sea of curious onlookers, ready to claim Jessica. But before they could, Prince emerged from the house like a man possessed. "Leave my daughter alone," he roared, his voice cutting through the commotion. He stepped forward, blocking their path. "She is innocent. Take her mother instead. She is the matchmaker, not my daughter."
The police officer came forward saying, "Veronica, you are under arrest for fraud and deception. Anything you say will be used against you." Veronica gasps, her knees weaken. The crowd murmurs. Prince exhales deeply, pulling Jessica into a protective embrace. As Veronica is led away, Jessica watches, her face conflicted. The realization of her mother's crimes settles in. In the barracks, secrets don't stay buried for long. Veronica thought she could outsmart everyone, but the truth has a way of finding you. Now she must face the consequences of her deception. No lie lasts forever.
Man, today's juices scare me. Before we even start, make sure you lock that door. Don't call my name. I beg. Wait first. Have you subscribed? Then do it quietly, okay? Like that. Oh yeah, let's go. Cannot do this.
Let me take it from here. This kind of tale. Only the brave dare to tell it. Ella, she's gone. This is too much for her to handle. But you're still here. That means you're ready. Or maybe just too curious to stop now. Welcome to the real story of Block 7. Hold your breath. Things are about to get worse. Before we begin, you need to understand one thing. This is not just a story. It is a warning, a piece of history, buried in fear, whispered only in hushed voices, by those who have lived to tell the tale.
In Agodi Barracks, where soldiers and their families once found refuge, there was one building, unlike the rest, a structure cloaked in silence, untouched by time. They called it Block 7. At exactly 2 a.m., the sound of marching boots would echo through its empty corridors, steady, rhythmic, precise, not the careless steps of a lost wanderer, but the disciplined, methodical stomp of a soldier on duty. The only problem? No one was there. Some called it superstition. Others, dismissed it as the creaks of an aging building, the wind playing tricks on the mind. But the families who had spent just one night there, they knew better. There was something or someone that never left Block 7, a presence unseen, but always felt, a shadow that did not belong. And those who ignored the warnings, not all of them lived to regret it. It was a quiet evening when Major Martins arrived at Agodi Barracks with his wife, Miriam, and 4 kids. A new posting, a new beginning. But what they didn't know was that they had been assigned a house no one else dared to live in. Their assigned quarters? Block 7. For years it had stood empty. Rumors swirled about strange noises, shadows moving where there were none, and whispers that carried through the night. But Major Martins, he was a man of discipline, a soldier. He had heard the stories but dismissed them as old wives' tales. Superstitions meant nothing to him.
Major Martins chuckling confident.
Ghosts? Come on, Miriam, it's just an old building. Nothing more.
But Miriam, she wasn't so sure. The moment she stepped inside, she felt it, an unease settling deep in her bones, like eyes watching from the shadows.
Martins, this house feels strange.
The Major shrugged, brushing off her concerns. The house was old. It had history. That was all. That night, as the family settled into their new home, the barracks grew still. The night was cool, the air thick with silence. And then... Major Martins froze for a moment. Then, shaking his head, he walked toward the door. Perhaps a neighbor? Another officer checking in? But when he looked outside, there was no one there. Nothing but the cold night air and the distant hum of barracks life. He frowned, stepping back inside, locking the door behind him. He thought nothing of it, but Miriam, she knew. Something was wrong. A week later, Obina was in his room when he heard footsteps pacing outside his door. He opened it. Nothing. Then a chilling whisper.
Leave this place, or you will suffer the same fate.
Obina froze. The voice was coming from the empty corridor. He ran to his mother, gasping. Miriam, now terrified, demanded they leave, but the Major refused.
I will not let fear drive me from my house.
Determined to uncover the mystery, Miriam visited Mama Titi, an elderly woman who had lived in the barracks for over 40 years. Mama Titi shook her head.
You are in great danger. Block 7 belonged to Captain Idris during the Civil War. He went missing during a midnight raid, but his wife, she never left the house. They say she went mad, waiting for him. And when she died, her soul stayed, still searching for her husband.
Miriam's hands trembled. She had seen an old military coat in their house, but it wasn't her husband's. That night, Major Martins finally believed. As he sat reading, the shadow of a man crossed his room. He grabbed his pistol and ran outside, but all he found were muddy footprints leading to the back of the house. Footprints that stopped suddenly, as if the person vanished into thin air. Suddenly, Obina screamed from his room. When the Major and Miriam rushed in, they found him levitating, an invisible force holding him in the air. His eyes rolled back, his voice distorted. Miriam's trembling hands gripped Obina's dangling legs, her breath uneven as she whispered prayers under her breath.
Jesus, let my son go. Please release my child.
Major Martins, his heart pounding in his chest, stood frozen, his pistol useless against whatever unseen force held his son captive. Then, as if in response to Miriam's cries, a sudden gust of wind whooshed through the room, extinguishing the bedside lamp. A deep, eerie silence followed. Obina dropped to the ground, gasping for air. His body twitched as his wide, terrified eyes darted across the room. Miriam scooped him into her arms, rocking him gently as she sobbed. Major Martin swallowed hard, his voice hoarse.
Obina, son, are you all right?
Obina barely nodded, his breath ragged. He clung to his mother, his small body shivering uncontrollably.
Miriam, still clutching her son, looked up at Major Martins. Her face was pale with exhaustion, her eyes swollen from unshed tears. Then, to his shock, she fell to her knees before him, gripping his shirt tightly.
Martins, please. I can't stay here. I can't do this anymore. It's only been 2 nights and I feel like I'm losing my mind. This house, it's cursed. We have to leave.
Major Martins clenched his jaw, his hands trembling at his sides. He was a soldier, trained to withstand fear, to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. But this was something he couldn't fight. Miriam's voice dropped to a whisper as fresh tears streamed down her face.
There's something I didn't tell you.
I went to see Mama Titi.
Major Martins took a slow step back, his expression unreadable. Mama Titi? That old woman? Miriam? You went to her without telling me? Miriam nodded, her grip tightening around Obina.
She knows things, Martins. She told me about this house and about Captain Idris.
Major Martins let out a slow, shaky breath. Tell me everything.
The year was 1969, a harrowing chapter in the Civil War, a conflict that tore through the fabric of the nation like a relentless storm. Captain Idris, a man of unwavering honor and unyielding duty, stood as a beacon of resilience amidst the chaos. He was not just a soldier, he was a husband, deeply and passionately in love with his wife, Amina. Their bond was a sanctuary, a fragile oasis in the desert of war. Idris had just returned from the front lines, a survivor of a brutal campaign that had decimated his battalion. Out of 1,124 able-bodied men, only 12 had staggered back, their spirits shattered, but their bodies intact. Idris was among them, his soul scarred, but his resolve unbroken. The military protocol dictated that he be granted a month of inactive duty, a brief respite to heal and gather his strength. But fate, cruel and unrelenting, had other plans. His commanding officer, a man devoid of empathy and driven by cold pragmatism, callously added Idris's name to the roster of another imminent deployment.
Amina's world crumbled when she heard the news. Her tears flowed like a river, each drop a testament to her despair. She pleaded with every officer, every bureaucrat, her voice trembling with desperation. She begged, she implored, she even threatened, but her cries fell on deaf ears. The machinery of war was indifferent to her anguish.
Idris, ever the stoic, tried to comfort her. He held her hands, his touch a fragile promise in the face of uncertainty. I will return soon, my love. Stay here. Stay safe. Amina clung to him, her fingers gripping his uniform as if her love alone could anchor him to safety. Her eyes, pools of unspoken fear, searched his face for reassurance.
Promise me, Idris. Promise me you will come back.
I swear it. I will come for you, my love.
The moment was shattered by the piercing blast of a whistle, followed by the harsh, guttural commands of a sergeant. The air grew heavy with the weight of impending departure. Idris turned away, his silhouette a fleeting shadow against the backdrop of a war-torn horizon. He marched into the abyss, his figure swallowed by the oppressive fog of battle. He never returned. The days that followed were a blur of anguish for Amina. Her muffled cries echoed through the empty halls of their home, a haunting symphony of grief. She clutched a pillow to her chest, rocking back and forth as if the motion could soothe the gaping wound in her heart. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The house, once filled with the warmth of their love, grew cold and silent. Amina refused to accept the finality of his absence. She sat by the door, her eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for a miracle that would never come. For Amina, Time stood still, each moment a cruel reminder of the life she had lost. Her heart, once a beacon of love, now beat with the rhythm of a dirge, a mournful tribute to the man who had promised to return but had vanished into the unforgiving maw of war. Neighbors whispered that she had gone mad. They claimed her wails could be heard echoing through the barracks at night. She would sit by the window, staring into the darkness, waiting for a shadow that never came. Then, one cold night, she was found lifeless in her rocking chair, still clutching a letter from her husband that had never reached her. Back in the present, Miriam's hands trembled as she wiped her tears.
She never moved on, Martins. Her soul. It never left Block 7. She's still searching for him.
And Idris? What happened to him? No one knows. His body was never found, but she... Miriam hesitates. She's waiting for us to bring him home.
Find him! Bring him home! Yes, Mom! Dad, find him and bring him to her!
She told me she needs help. She told me she's always outside and scared. Please help her.
That night, the barracks was anything but silent. Doors slammed on their own. Furniture scraped against the floor. Whispers turned into screams. Major Martins finally understood. This was no ordinary haunting. This was a woman's pain, echoing through time, demanding closure. And if they didn't find Idris, they would never be free. The following morning, Agony Barracks was unusually quiet. For the first time in weeks, there were no whispers, no phantom footsteps, no slamming doors. The environment felt hollow, as though something or someone was waiting. Major Martins sat at the table, his face etched with exhaustion. Miriam, her hands still trembling, held onto Obinna, who had barely spoken since the night before. They had spent 3 nights in Block 7, and it was clear. This was no ordinary haunting. This was a woman's pain, echoing through time, demanding closure. And if they didn't find Idris, they would never be free. With the help of a few older officers and Mama Titi, they began their search for Captain Idris's final resting place. Mama Titi, lowering her voice. His body was never returned, but some say the soldiers who died in the war were buried together, forgotten. Miriam, whispering, looking around cautiously, then we need to find where they laid him. Major Martins, Miriam, and Mama Titi walked deeper into the barracks, toward an abandoned, overgrown field near the far end of the compound. Bushes and vines tangled over the area, hiding what once stood there. After nearly an hour of searching, they stumbled upon a rusted plaque, barely legible under layers of grime. It read, "Here lie the forgotten." Miriam's breath hitched. Her fingers traced the corroded metal as a shiver ran through her spine. Miriam, softly, voice trembling. This is it. This is where he is. Captain Idris. They returned to Captain Idris's home and buried him near his wife Amina.
This is for the forgotten, for the ones who waited, and for the ones who never came home. To every family who has lost someone to war, to the battles fought beyond the fields, and to the memories that refuse to fade. May their names never be forgotten. May their stories live on. May their soul rest in peace. Amen.